For 2 weeks, as the Strait of Hormuz became effectively impassable for oil tankers, there was one port that energy markets, shipping companies, and American allies were pointing to as a partial escape route: Fujairah. Located in the UAE on the Gulf of Oman, on the other side of the Oman Peninsula from the strait itself, Fujairah was built specifically so that oil from the Persian Gulf could be exported without passing through the Hormuz choke point. It handles approximately 1 million barrels per day of the UAE's Murban crude oil, according to Reuters reporting, and it has taken on enormous strategic significance since the war began because it is one of the very few export outlets for Gulf oil that does not require navigating through 21 miles of Iranian-controlled water. Today, March 14th, that escape route caught fire. Debris from an intercepted Iranian drone struck the Fujairah port, triggering a fire at the major bunkering hub, suspending oil loading operations, and prompting Iran's military to tell civilians in the UAE to evacuate ports, docks, and what it called American hideouts. Halima Croft, the chief commodities analyst at RBC Capital, immediately put the significance of today's strike into words that every energy market participant understood. She said the IRGC is sending a message that there is no safe harbor in this rapidly expanding conflict. I went through Reuters reporting, Time magazine's analysis, Al Jazeera's Day 15 conflict coverage, France 24 reporting, Euronews live updates, and energy market analysis from JP Morgan, RBC Capital, and other institutions to give you the complete picture of what Fujairah is, why hitting it matters strategically, and what it means for global energy markets and American consumers. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why today's Fujairah attack may be more economically significant than the Karg Island strikes from the previous day. Let's start with the geography. Understanding why Fujairah matters requires a brief explanation of the geography of oil export infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region. The vast majority of Gulf oil has historically been loaded onto tankers at terminals inside the Persian Gulf, meaning those tankers must transit the Strait of Hormuz to reach open ocean and onward to their destinations in Asia, Europe, and elsewhere. This geographic dependency on the strait is the foundation of Iran's leverage in the current conflict. If Iran can make the strait too dangerous for tankers to navigate, it can essentially hold the global oil supply hostage. Fujairah was developed as a strategic response to exactly this vulnerability. The Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, built by Abu Dhabi, runs approximately 400 kilometers from the oil fields of Abu Dhabi across the Omani Peninsula to Fujairah on the eastern coast, where tankers loading at the terminal never need to enter the Persian Gulf or transit the strait at all. Saudi Arabia has a similar bypass capability through its east-west pipeline that carries oil to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. But Fujairah is the most significant bypass terminal in terms of current daily throughput and its importance to the UAE's oil export operations. Today's attack changed the calculus in a way that energy analysts are describing as transformative for how the oil market must now think about this conflict. By striking Fujairah, Iran demonstrated that it can reach and disrupt oil export infrastructure that does not depend on the Strait of Hormuz at all. The message is exactly what Halima Croft identified: there is no safe harbor. Iran's military spokesperson went further, calling the UAE a legitimate target and telling civilians to evacuate ports, docks, and what it described as American hideouts, the latter phrase referring to U.S. military positions and assets in the UAE that Iran says were used as launch points for the Karg Island strikes the previous night. Iran's Foreign Minister Arakchi said on live television that it is clear the missiles that hit Karg Island overnight came from two locations inside the UAE, establishing in Iran's public framing a causal chain. UAE territory was used to attack Iran, therefore UAE energy infrastructure is a legitimate Iranian target. This framing gives Iran both a military rationale and a diplomatic message to Gulf Arab states about the cost of allowing American forces to operate from their territory. The immediate operational impact of the Fujairah attack was significant. According to Reuters reporting citing industry and trade sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, some oil loading operations at Fujairah were suspended on Saturday as a precaution while damage was being assessed. Television footage showed plumes of dark, thick smoke rising into the air over the energy facility. Loading of crude and refined products was halted at a port that normally handles approximately 1 million barrels of oil per day. For global oil markets already straining under the Hormuz closure, the loss of even temporary access to one of the most significant bypass export terminals is deeply alarming. JP Morgan analysts had previously identified Fujairah as a critical pressure valve for Gulf oil exports during the Hormuz disruption. Today, that pressure valve partially closed. The broader pattern of Iranian targeting throughout the conflict reveals a systematic and strategic approach to energy infrastructure that goes beyond simple retaliation. According to Euronews reporting, since the beginning of the war, Iran has methodically targeted Gulf energy sites from Kuwait to Oman, including the massive Ras Tanura refinery in Saudi Arabia, the Ras Laffan gas processing base in Qatar, and the complex housing the UAE's Ruwais refinery. Today's Fujairah attack follows this pattern but crosses a threshold because Fujairah was specifically the infrastructure that the market had identified as partially insulated from the conflict. By demonstrating the ability and willingness to hit Fujairah, Iran has effectively told energy markets that no Gulf oil infrastructure should be considered safe as long as the war continues, and as long as Gulf Arab states allow American forces to operate from their territories. The reaction of Gulf Arab states to being caught between American and Iranian pressure has been a story largely missing from American media coverage. Reuters reporting cited sources who described mounting resentment in Gulf Arab capitals at being drawn into a war they neither initiated nor endorsed, but are now paying for economically and militarily. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman are formal American security partners who have hosted American military forces for decades, precisely because that presence was supposed to deter exactly the kind of Iranian aggression they are now experiencing. Today's Fujairah attack and the broader pattern of Iranian strikes against Gulf infrastructure is the most direct challenge to the American security umbrella's credibility that these states have ever faced. And they are watching in real time as their airports are damaged, their oil facilities are hit, their civilian populations are living under air raid alerts, and the American president is posting on Truth Social asking China to send warships. For American consumers, today's Fujairah attack has two simultaneous economic implications. First, the suspension of loading operations at Fujairah removes additional oil supply from global markets at a moment when supply is already severely constrained by the Hormuz closure, which is directionally upward for oil prices. The national average gas price hit $3.68 today, according to AAA, up 5 cents from Friday. Second, Iran's demonstrated ability to hit bypass infrastructure signals to energy markets that the geographic scope of the supply disruption is larger than the Hormuz closure alone suggested, which changes market participants' probability assessments for how long and how severe the disruption will be. Oil analysts at JP Morgan had modeled various scenarios for the conflict's energy market impact, and the scenario in which Iran systematically attacks Gulf bypass infrastructure is among the most severe they had considered. Today, that scenario moved from theoretical to actual. Those who see the Fujairah attack as a turning point argue that it fundamentally changes the military and diplomatic calculus of the conflict. If Iran can hit the bypass routes as well as control the strait, the United States and its partners cannot simply route around the Hormuz problem. The only solutions are military suppression of Iran's strike capability, which is what the bombing campaign has been attempting for 2 weeks with partial success, or a negotiated de-escalation that addresses Iran's core demands, which the Trump administration has so far been unwilling to consider. Those who maintain that the military campaign will ultimately succeed argue that today's Fujairah strike, while serious, was accomplished with drone debris rather than a direct missile hit, that UAE air defenses intercepted the main threat, and that Iran's declining missile and drone volumes down 90%, according to Defense Secretary Hegseth, means its ability to sustain this level of attack on widespread targets is diminishing. Let's bring this all together. Iran struck the UAE's Fujairah oil hub today, triggering a fire and suspending oil loading operations at a port specifically built to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. This attack demonstrates that Iran can reach and disrupt Gulf energy infrastructure beyond the strait itself. Iran's military declared UAE territory a legitimate target and told civilians to evacuate ports. Energy analysts called it a message that there is no safe harbor in this conflict. Gulf Arab states are experiencing growing resentment at being drawn into a war they did not choose. Oil prices hit Brent near $104 per barrel. Gas prices in the United States hit $3.68 nationally today. The energy market must now price the possibility that virtually all Gulf export infrastructure is at risk as long as this war continues. Watch oil market movements Sunday evening when trading reopens. Watch whether Fujairah resumes loading operations, and watch whether the UAE issues any formal diplomatic response to Iran's declaration of its territory as a legitimate target. If this breakdown gave you the energy market context behind today's most important story for your wallet, please hit the like button and subscribe so you catch every update. Drop a comment with what you think Iran will target next. I will see you in the next one.